Welcome to the AI Ireland podcast, your window into the world of AI innovation on the island of Ireland. Join us as we explore how AI is harnessed to tackle both business and societal challenges, revealing the cutting-edge solutions emerging from this vibrant AI community. Don't forget to subscribe for the latest updates and insights in the world of AI. Hello everybody, it's Mark Kelly here. I hope you're doing well wherever you are in the world today. I'm very, very happy to have one of our finalists for Best Use of Responsible AI and Ethics, representing University of Limerick. His application talks about the safety and responsible large language models, or LLM, which addresses bias in large language models by fine-tuning safe models with specialized data sets and instruction-based methods. With an approach that promotes ethical AI practices and transparency, it enhances bias reduction and knowledge retention, which is validated through diverse testing. We have got Deepak John Reji, who is a podcaster himself, who has a podcast called D-Data, who is a senior data scientist working at a company called Carolyn and also associated with UL. So we've got the pleasure of speaking to Deepak. Deepak, for people that don't necessarily know much about large language models or the difference between safe and responsible ones, why is this fine-tuning of safe models and specialized data sets very important?
So first of all, thank you for inviting me to this particular podcast. And first of all, this subject is pretty intriguing actually, and the concept of bias is very complex to define. Like because we all have like some sort of bias in the way we actually do things, maybe the way we talk, maybe the way we think, the perception and things like that. So the problem is like we see data everywhere, and most of these data are inherently biased in some form. So now, when I was reading this news headline, so there is this headline where it's being written like Billie Eilish issues apology for mouthing an anti-Asian derogatory term in a resurfaced video. So that's a headline, and now the same headline is represented by different news provider in different ways, basically. So now, why is this important? So the idea behind bias is that like the same news headline itself can be represented in different way, wherein like the target audience is different, the region is different, the demographics is different. So now why and how this is happening? Because first of all, like all of these systems where like we are having, which is like moderated by humans, sometimes miss out certain aspects like this, where some of the tone, some of the sentiment, some of the emotion towards certain words, phrases kind of change. And that's when all of these things happen. Some of these things are actually near misses. But then the thought was like, if we have a content moderation system in place which kind of filter these kind of bias which is inherent in some form, in some shape, we could actually improve the way we represent the data in much more better way. So this research actually started in the year 2021, wherein we kind of like wanted to detect, first we wanted to detect what is the bias, is there is a bias or not, and then we need to identify the bias causing words and phrases, and then we need to finally try to understand, okay, like what are the other alternatives. So that was the motive behind that particular study when we started in the year 2021. And following that, we started training a lot of models in which we increase the data set span from media data, healthcare data, occupational data. And finally, the application which I put forward for this particular award mainly constitutes of LLMs, because that's the catch right now, because LLMs are so powerful, which can kind of represent all of this bias and fairness in a very large scale. So the whole idea was like, what if we fine tune an LLM which can actually understand and mitigate bias in the first run itself? That means, so you would have noticed actually, like when you first give a prompt to the LLM in some form, like who is a successful CEO, maybe that will actually perpetuate a more inclination towards a male CEO rather than a female CEO. That itself is actually a biased way of representing in terms of how the response is kind of coming. So now the thought was like, how can we fine tune an LLM without like degrading its knowledge base, so that like it understands the context that it shouldn't be biased. So that was the thought in which we trained some of these systems. So we hand curated some of the data, which like using some annotation experts, so 15 to 20 experts coming out from like computer science, statistics, sociology, and then psychology. So they all came up with this data, and then that's the data which we actually use to train the system, and that's what the application was about. Like, so we kind of build the system, we open sourced it so that people can actually use it. So, and we are kind of promoting the safe and responsible AI through this particular application.
So we all know the challenge that large language models bring, and that is based off the data sets that they're using, and that bias is then going to be baked into them unless you purposely try to work through. And it's not a straightforward problem to
Right.
work on. What are some of the challenges to go through this?
So first of all, like when we tried curating this data set, we are actually pulling the data from the internet, obviously, like all the other data modeling which is happening. So when we try to pull the data from the internet, obviously this data is biased. Most of the data is biased. So now the hand curation part. So in this particular paper, there is a process wherein like the hand curation is happening, and then they are actually taking 20,000 samples from all of the million data which they kind of pulled. So now that process itself is quite challenging because we need to kind of handpick the data which kind of perpetuate some sort of bias. First of all, it's subjective because if we take four people, maybe bias in someone's head will not be bias in another person's head, basically. So that's the ultimate complexity of this particular problem, because that depends on the region, that depends on, so that's where this crowdsourcing and all this human feedback system is coming into place. So we introduce this scoring methodology wherein like, so let's say four people are actually saying that, okay, this is a probability of bias. We are actually taking the weighted average there to understand what is, okay, is it really biased or not? So that itself is one of the biggest challenge. So the data preparation is the first challenge. The second challenge is like, these models are extremely huge. So training all these systems, like other than like, okay, if until unless we are not a tech giant, like it is pretty hard to actually train all of this system because we need that much compute, we need that much energy. And then obviously all of this training constitutes a lot of carbon emission as well. So all of these things has to actually be tracked when we kind of do it, because ultimately we shouldn't be building something which is not of use. So that is one of the, so the hardware resources is actually one of the major hurdle. And now the evaluation, so evaluation is also kind of subjective. So we use a lot of evaluation metrics actually. So even OpenAI has a content moderation API wherein like it kind of tell the probability that, okay, whether it is falling below or not, whether it is unsafe or not. So likewise we also implemented like some of the things like cleanse score, whether there is like we can understand the style of that particular text, whether it is determined, whether it is arrogant, all these kind of styles. So all of these methods, when we are actually baselining, let's say we are coming up with 6 to 7 baseline metrics to evaluate the whole system. Sometimes we may miss out certain things. Sometimes maybe like it may work out in such a demographics. Maybe some race will be underrepresented actually. So because it's very complex that we cannot really handle everything, because it's like very highly complex and there is like a lot of dimension to it. So these are some of the challenges which we actually faced while we developed this.
What was some of the feedback when you open source this? Because it's such a challenging one because you have got values, I've got values. People in Ireland have probably got general different values than people in Sweden versus people in Germany versus people in China or India. And you come to the table with certain assumptions, and those assumptions might be okay for where you are, but actually they could be way off depending on the people who you're working with and the people who you want to do interesting projects for with outcomes that are going to be served by so many different types of people of this world. So it's a really, really difficult one to work towards. That so that's kind of like an assumption log almost that you're trying to bring to the table.
So that was actually the most interesting part of this project, because I still remember like in the last year PyCon event, which happened in Dublin, I put forward this particular statement of Billie Eilish on the screen. And I asked from the audience, like, how many people think that this is a biased statement? And first of all, this example is actually categorized as the most biased statement in the internet, and it is ranked in some of the websites actually. But then most of the audience, most of the people from the audience actually said, I don't see this actually as a bias statement. So that itself is the complexity of this particular problem, because it depends on the way we read, it depends on the time, it depends on the place. So as you mentioned, like the demographics matters a lot. So the person in US or UK may not find it biased, like how, okay, we feel like, okay, it's a bias statement in Ireland. So why it's happening like that? So the problem is like the words, the phrases which we use in our day-to-day, like the vocabulary which we have, unintentionally, this is actually like perpetuated over the period of time, or like this is actually like flowing through the period of time, which we feel like, okay, it's not really biased. But then the problem lies is like when the data set is published, that means when the data set is becoming from primary source to a secondary source, when it is actually published in a source in internet, that's when the problem comes, because the data which is published in the internet is actually accessible to everyone. It's not just accessible to actually a particular crowd until unless it is actually restricted. So that's where we need to see that it is being representative, it is being transparent, it is being like safe to be used by all the people basically. So not just a crowd from a particular region or a country. So yeah.
And then you're getting the human feedback, which is you're integrating the human feedback, which is allowing the reinforcement learning from the human feedback. So then you've got that kind of incorporation, which is allowing the kind of training process to kind of align more closely with, let's say, ethical standards or kind of societal values. So this iterative kind of feedback loop is, I'm guessing, kind of enhancing the model, while also kind of giving more appropriate context.
That's true. That's true. So when we were actually involving this data annotation process using this human feedback system, so we made sure the 15-20 people who were working on this process are from different places. So not just one single places. So they actually embodies their whole of their culture, all of their social identity, and all of their values when they actually say that, okay, this statement is having this particular probability score. So now from there, when we are doing the crowdsourcing, that's when it becomes more meaningful that, okay, when we take the average out of it, or when we take the highest score out of it, so what will be the measure? That actually becomes more representative than really concising into a particular region or a location. So we made sure to do that particular process during this whole of the project actually.
So when we actually look at the benefits and the opportunities, so you've got like enhanced product offerings that are kind of going to be, can have more custom solutions for clients. You got better ways to have kind of safer variations, which is going to be, impact for content, for example. Increased trust and user engagement, which is obviously kind of paramount, because if people don't trust this, they're not going to consistently use it or engage it.
Right.
And then there's the opportunity for new market opportunities. So talk to me a little bit about how you could maybe expand it to new sectors or partnerships, collaborations.
So I feel like since this is a very specific context, so like this this solution can be actually taken or scaled to any of the domains basically. So whether it is healthcare, whether it is retail, whether it is education sector, whether it is like social sector. So the best part is like the approach which is detailed in this research, it's actually like an approach that could be implemented in all of these domains. So for example, like the main idea behind this all of the solution is like we are doing instruction led fine tuning. So when we are doing the instruction led fine tuning, we are actually giving specific instruction based on that particular domain. So now imagine like we are putting the same thing in the healthcare domain, wherein like we are actually having more sensitive data. So when that particular system is in place, we tweak the data as per that domain and the instruction as well. So this approach is actually like we could actually scale that to that particular context. But then the problem lies is like, imagine we are having this humongous model in different domains. So first of all, like every company is now producing LLMs, like Facebook has LLM, then all the other Google has LLM, all the companies has LLMs now, Apple has an LLM, Nvidia has an LLM. But then all of the companies mostly like they actually use the API version of it, so they don't really try to fine tune the model, or they don't really try to tweak the model. So that's when these kind of approaches can actually create a better way, because we are really tailoring the solution in such a way that it really caters to the need of the end user or the customer by preserving how the data should be actually looking like. So
And this is really important because you've got EU AI Act regulation now.
correct.
You've got you can't just say the dog ate my homework here. You just have to you're responsible. If you're putting that out to the world, you're responsible for the impact. So you need to be kind of conscious on what you're doing. Tell me a little bit about the vision to take this forward. From you kind of we talked a little bit about ethical AI development, user-centric solutions, and being very, very transparent and having that accountability. How do you continuously improve it and adapt this? What's the plan for the future?
So the biggest plan is like, first of all, we are trying to adapt this research. So it's been like 3 years now. So we try to adapt with whatever new in the market actually. So the first thing is like when transformers were becoming popular, we kind of like trying to understand how transformers can be actually used for it. And now, like over the when we actually transitioning to the LLM space. So basically, what happens is like the tech sector is actually like expanding in a much like faster pace, and in which like prominent solutions like this is actually coming up. So now, like when cloud AI actually now recently dropped, like okay, they can actually control the system level use, or like they can actually automate the stuff. So now most of these things are actually going in that direction. So every day when we read like LinkedIn or other sources, we can actually see new things. But then what happens is like responsible AI and how AI could be used in an ethical way is still lagging behind all of these things. So what happens is there is no like proportion in which, okay, if point A is there, we are not really trying to achieve that. Okay, it should actually hit point A at every single point of time. So that's when the problem is there. So that's what we are trying to advocate users, developers, companies, organizations to kind of foster this development in such a way that this is also coming up along with it. This is also coming along with the development. So that is number one thing. So the first primary thing is like more than implementation, more than market use, we want to actually advocate people who are using AI to think about responsible AI at the first picture itself. Not like we develop something, then we can think about responsible AI. No, that's not really the ideal way. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is like when we are actually so the when we developed this particular project, the recent one of the primary thing was like the process of anchoration become little complex actually, because like we really are still not sure that we still covered all the demographics, all the age, all the gender, all the parameters basically. So we really don't know whether we kind of and human emotions are actually varying, right? We cannot really say that we can really binarize these kind of things, or like we cannot really bucketize saying like okay, this is this, because there are like so many, it's not really black and white. So all of these nuances we need to actually understand more, like how humans think, how humans, and when these kind of intellectual thought comes to a human mind, like okay, when they read a sentence, what exactly happened behind their brain. So this level of cognitive science is what we need to actually implement in these kind of AI system when they try to read a sentence. So this level of intelligence is actually missing in most of the solutions, even the solution which we developed. And that's what we need to actually do it as the next step. So we need to understand the socio psychological, and we need to embed the cognitive science inside these kind of solutions. So that's the major advancement which we are actually looking for.
Yeah, and only really through feedback and getting different perspectives, it will iterate. And but
Exactly.
you're very, very thoughtful with your approach. There's a lot of incredible experience from a variety of different people involved in this. You've been listening to the AI Ireland podcast, and as part of the AI Awards, we've been chatting with a colleague from the University of Limerick, who's also a senior data scientist at a company called Carolyn. And we've been chatting about best use of responsible AI and ethics, which is representative from UL and also in collaboration with Sheridan College and Vector Institute for Artificial Intelligence in Ontario, Canada. It was a wonderful story today. Thank you so much, Deepak John Reji, for sharing that information with us on the AI Ireland podcast.
Thank you so much, it's been a pleasure actually.
Membership of AI Ireland places your organisation at the centre of the fastest growing technology sector in the world today. As a member, you'll have access to our diverse and highly engaged professional community, which is committed to driving artificial intelligence forward in Ireland. Membership of AI Ireland is for any organisation employing data and analytics. We offer memberships to corporate, government and SME organisations. Interested to find out more? Contact mark@aiawards.ie.